So hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. It's great to have you join me on this, well, it's going to be a solo episode today. It's just me and you. Hello. I hope you're keeping well. So what have I been up to? I've been really busy over these last few weeks. Firstly, because of my dad's matter. He's now been passed away. What are we on now? He's been passed away about, I think 5 weeks now. So the funeral was a couple of weeks ago. And do you know what? How do I feel about it? Someone asked me a while ago, how am I integrating it? And I'm actually sitting here now at my desk looking at a photo of me and him, actually, where I must have been, looking at this photo about 2 or 3 years old, and he's holding me. And do you know what? It's like a really vintage photo. It's like almost like the frame doesn't even fit it properly, but it's all adds to its kind of character. And obviously, I'm deeply missing him. This is a really interesting story. So, well, it's really interesting to me anyway. So on my email address that I use for the podcast and on my Medium work, my dad never knew about that email address as far as I know, because I never emailed him from that email address because that's a different email address. Anyway, I was going through my inbox today, and you know, like you always have the oldest email at the bottom, the one that's like undeleted. Normally that's for me, that's something that's been in there a few weeks and it's like, I must get back to that. I went through it today and there was an email from my dad on my birthday, and very sort of character email in a sort of way. And it just said that he loved me and this was a birthday present. And it's actually to go see a show in January, which is going to be bloody emotional to go to. It's a magic show. And because obviously he knows I love magic shows. I've been really fortunate in my life to see so many different magic shows. I used to, like I've said earlier on this podcast, I used to perform as a magician. That was my very first job at a school. I was 16 years old, hated school because I went to a horrible school, which was one of the the third bottom secondary school in the country. It wasn't where I started out, but I won't go into all the ins and outs of this or why I come to be at that school. But I just wanted to get out of school as quickly as possible. So I was really into performing magic. And back then it was before sort of, you know, there were YouTube videos everywhere. It was really hard to learn magic as well, because obviously it's very secretive. So to get people to teach you magic is extremely difficult. But I found that there was a magic society where I lived at the time in a place called Medway in Kent. But you had to be, I think it was at least, 15 years old or 14 years old or something like that. And I was under the age, and they still met me and they made an exception to the rule and let me join. And back then, it brings out the inner child in me even just telling this story. Back then, I was friends with a guy called Jamie. And Jamie was just a really kind young soul. He was the same age as me, but a bit older. That's why I joined. And he was a lot more advanced with his magic. And I would develop my own routines. And, it's just, so when I left school, naturally, first job I got was just working in a restaurant, washing dishes. Very nice job, as you can imagine, just receiving all the dirty plates. I was very efficient at it, though. That dishwasher was filled like it was never filled before. So, yeah, and then I would go and busk, and I was very good at drumming up interest even back then, because I would get out the local paper. Because of my age, I'm actually looking at one of the newspaper clippings now. It says "Tricks are a treat," and it was me performing magic at a restaurant, and I got a local newspaper down, which led to more bookings. And actually, this is how organised my dad was. My brother gave me a wallet recently of some of my possessions, and it was my books, my paper accounts from back then, because when you would obviously log all the accounts manually, and then you have your weekly book where you would log it all, and it was all my mum's handwriting logging. I'd made £250 this week from performing, and my dad went with me to set up a business account when I was 16. The magic only stayed around really in my life until like full on working job until I was 18 years old, because when I got to 18 I got a job with Virgin Atlantic and I moved back to London and I was ground staff at Virgin Atlantic, which I loved. There is nothing like working in an airport, especially Heathrow, like the magic of it. Like back then I must have walked some days 25,000 steps, but this was before the days of the smartwatch. So that's what I would do back then. So this photo kind of reminds me of that. And obviously, it's been just such a hard period, I think, because I've been grieving. And then whilst I've been grieving, I was trying to support my brother because it's just sort of turned his world upside down. So you're probably thinking, how is my mediumship going? And do you know what prompted me to do this episode today was I got an email in my inbox, and it was from a lovely lady who emailed me to ask me about mediumship and to say that she's really interested in it. I won't say your name and embarrass you, but you sent me a very nice email to ask about mediumship. And it has made me aware that I haven't talked about it much on this show. And I'm going to say right now why that is. So a friend pulled me up the other day and said to me, on this show, I keep saying that I'm developing my mediumship, that I'm expanding my mediumship, that I'm trying to develop my mediumship. I'm just going to say right now, I have come to the conclusion that I am a medium. That is what I'm saying I am now. I am a medium, and I have done more than enough stuff now in mediumship. So what I noticed is by keep saying that I am developing my mediumship, I am robbing myself of my power. And the power is what we need in mediumship. You need to be in your own power to connect with the spirit world. But I'm doing a lot of you a massive disservice by not really talking about my mediumship and how to do. And not just how to do, because I want to say now that I'm never going to tell you on this podcast that anything is fact. I always talk in truth and love, and I will give you my opinion on things, but I encourage you to go out there and get your own opinions, because with a lot of mediumship, and I'm going to say this now, it's about your own experiences. How I experience my mediumship will be different to however someone else experiences their mediumship. So that's why it's very complicated at the beginning. And you probably heard this for people that have been listening to the show for quite a while. You've probably heard me go on this journey of asking 8 million and one times, where is the power? And we're going to be talking a lot about the power in the coming months of this show, because I'm going to be referring to it and really delving deep into the power. So yes, I've been robbing my own power, and I'm not robbing it anymore because it's stopping me from helping some of you. So I'm a medium. Hello, I'm Jason Paul. There we go. There's a new introduction for you. So I want to help you on this podcast to essentially share my knowledge with you, share what I've learned and how these things apply to life. So, and I have to say, why would you want spirit in your life? Let's say that you've never connected to the spirit world before, and you might be, dubious. Because when I started out in this journey, I was dubious. My own granddad was a medium, and even that for me wasn't enough. Because I've said it on this show, I used to speak to him, but I was more interested in the paranormal and hearing funny stories from my granddad of the spinning plants in the house when they were growing up. So I never didn't believe it, because I would hear the stories. I would hear the stories of the plant pot that would go spinning round at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I would hear the stories of how they had to move out. My granddad and mum had to move out of their house because of it, because it would drive my sister to insanity, and she was actually having a mental health breakdown as a result of this. If she is listening to this show, I totally apologise for saying that story, but that's what I heard, for the record. Anyway, so I did believe in it. I believed in it, but I was interested in the tarot, what the tarot would allow me to do with my own life. So I was fascinated, because at that age, I hadn't had anyone pass away that actually, I guess you could say, I'd had some family members, but very distant family members, where the grief hadn't affected me in the same way. And then when my granddad died, I was at a terrible place in my life, because I was going through a really difficult time where essentially I had a court case against me because of an ex-partner who, essentially it was domestic abuse, and made a whole raft of false allegations against me. And I was at the point he was about to die was the point I just literally kind of just been found not guilty, like unanimously in the shortest amount of time, but I'd endured 18 months of waiting just under this absolute immense amount of pressure. And actually I feel like a lot of worry in my life, because my life before that point, it had been nice. My life had been nice. I'd been sort of, getting a job with Virgin and whatever. And then when I got the job with the police, that was when it all sort of just started going downhill. Like my life went, 180 upside down. And my life was a living bloody nightmare at that time. So when my granddad died, I never got a chance to ask him questions about the spirit world because it wasn't really on my consciousness. I had so much going on in my own life. So when he died, it was... years had gone by, and sort of his death had prompted... I'd been on ghost hunts, and that was me sort of trying to get evidence of the other world. So me and my mum would go to all sorts of locations. We'd go up and down the country on these ghost hunts, and they typically start at like 9 o'clock at night. You'd get there with your torch, and you had some supplies because you'd be there until like 3 a.m. We have been actually debating doing one recently, but back then in my 20s, I used to love staying up till that time. But recently I went on one actually, and it was a little bit too much. Because we turned up, it was for my birthday. It was about a year. Oh, no, it must have been about 2 years ago now. So we turned up to Shepton Mallet, where there's a prison it was a very, very famous prison because it housed a lot of people from like the 60s, the 80s. I think even before that, it's quite an old prison. It housed people like the Cray brothers and people. You're probably going to think now, why the hell did we visit it when I start telling you this story? But it had a wall where you could see the bullet holes on it from where people would be lined up and shot. That was one of their choices of execution. And then there was the hanging room, and they'd also show you these rooms as well where, I think if you'd been a bad prisoner, there would be a wheel that you would go round like a hamster wheel almost, and that would power the prison. So it's been decommissioned about 12 years. So we went there for my birthday, me and a few individuals, and we got there about 9 o'clock. They sort of sit you down in what was the old staff room, and it was like nothing could change. Like the notices were still on the wall, and then we proceeded to start going round the prison. And we'd been in there about a couple of hours. We sort of saw many of the highlights of the prison, and we saw some of the cells, and stuff was happening. I was getting, at that point as well, I'd started unfolding my mediumship it was the very early days, which makes me think then that this must have been longer than that. Yeah, this must have been longer than 2 years ago. It's funny. Honestly, my memory when it comes to time and dates is absolutely bloody awful. So yes, this must have been longer than that. But I remember I just started unfolding my mediumship. So we went to this prison, and I was feeling the intense energy. Cell doors were slamming. We were standing in there, and all sorts was going on. We had these balls that we had. I think they're like cat toy balls, which when they move, they light up. And they'd got a few of the balls on the ground, and they all started moving around. And then we did a bit of table tilting, and the table nearly took off. And then we got to the point where we sort of got more into the prison, and they'd taken us to a cell, which was the cell where the person would have their last night before the hanging. And then they were just about to take us into the hanging room. And I said, you know what? I know we've got another 2 hours or whatever it is to go on the tour, but I'm just going to have to pull the exit cord, I'm afraid, because I was like, no, I've had enough now. I've had enough. I believe in it. I do believe in it. And at that point, I would have said I believed in it, but I didn't know it. There's a difference between believing it and knowing it. To know it, you need to experience it. And that was why when I first went into the world of mediumship at the college for the first time, I would say at that point I believed in it 98%, which sounds like a lot, but the missing 2%, it took me a long time to get over that. So the first time I went on a course, I had a lot of things happen. My granddad came through to me. I couldn't have had more evidence if you tried, to be quite honest. I had this experience where because I didn't know anything about it really, like what course I was going on. I didn't realise who the tutors were. I hadn't really researched it. I just kind of knew I was going on this week. And then I thought, well, I'll sort of work it all out when I get there. And I sort of had the email with where I was going. And then I got there, and I very quickly had my granddad came through, and I knew it was him. But I knew it was him. There was no way it couldn't be him, because I'd visited mediums, but not, super good mediums. Well, I wouldn't even say super good. I don't want to get into that, but I'd say mediums, but they didn't give me the proof that I needed, which, if anything, that held up my journey, because of the fact, and I've been a big advocate for a long time about, wanting to really enforce good standards in mediumship, wanting to get back to, some of the traditions of old, of how we do the mediumship with, like some of the greats, like Eileen Garrett in mediumship, the teachings of Silver Birch, through Maurice Barbanel, the writings of Arthur Finlay. There's so many kind of exoteric mediums that, I want to bring that back, because I think we're in a time of confusion. And I know when I was trying to unfold my mediumship, I'd be watching videos on YouTube. Someone would describe it in one way, someone would describe it in another way, someone would describe it in another way. And I would be there, sitting there, experiencing things, and the spirit world were around me. I could feel them. When I first started sitting for the spirit world, actually, was after that first college course. And I would sit there in my room, upright, on a table. I would sort of light 2 candles very ceremoniously. I would sort of sit there and I would feel the spirit world come, and then I would jump and I'd go, oh my God, I'd get scared, I'd jump, because I would feel things and I would know it was the spirit world. But at that point in my journey, I believed that there was bad spirits and good spirits, and I needed to make sure that I welcomed in the right spirits, you could say. So I would do my, opening thing. I only want spirits of love and light and this and that. So I'm going to dispel that myth from the bloody get-go. Yes, when you go to the spirit world, you go to you go to a world where basically you remember what you are, and what you are is a soul, and you are reacquainted into the world that you've always been in. But before you went into the disillusionment of life on the earth plane, because as soon as we come to the earth, we don't forget it instantly, because, children are connected. Children haven't built up that, kind of, well, what happens when we're a child? We eventually, understand that we have to do this in society. We have to have this kind of job. We have to do well at school. We have to keep our parents happy. We have to do the right thing. And over time, we lose that. Some people keep that connection, and and I think there's a lot to be said that, if you was to raise your child in a way where I've talked about it on this podcast, but I do think that if you was to raise your child in a way where they were always using their intuition, then encouraged to express that sense of self-identity, then I think there's a lot that could be done, which is why I think that mediumship needs to be taught in schools in some way. Not as mediumship. We're not going to start sitting there with children. I don't propose this. We're not going to start sitting there and telling them that their great aunt, Thistle's going to come through. No, we're going to teach them some level of intuitive studies, because I have come to the conclusion now that I'm going to spend the second half of my life undoing everything that I have learnt in the first half of my life, because I think that's the irony, is I'm trying to unlearn all the preconditioning that I've had, because I believe that, and again, I say this is my belief. I encourage you to go out there, and experience and come up with your own truth, because, and I'm just going to divert for a moment before I come on to this revelation. For so long, and my granddad came through and told me this the other day, actually. Actually, this is funny because he comes through so often, which I'm so blessed that he does, because he's actually one of my spirit guides. I could talk about guides as well, because there's something about the word guide that is put on a pedestal, and I'm going to talk about that in another episode. So I'm now going to call my granddad one of my spirit helpers, and helpers come and go, but right now he is one of them, because he comes through to help me a lot, and his surname was Paul, Eddie Paul, and I'm Jason Paul, which is the name I use in the honour of his mediumship. So his spirit forever lives on in the work that I do. So I'm going off on another one of my Jason rabbit holes here. But I wanted to say that I've been reading this book, actually, and I wanted to just talk about that on this episode today. And actually, there's something I wanted to tell you that between now and, I will just talk about it now, between now and Christmas Day, I have obviously pleaded with some of you to leave a testimonial on the mid-rolls, which is the adverts, which I've now stopped doing because I'm not getting any, and I understand testimonials are difficult to get, so there is a bit of bribery here. But I'm only going to announce this once on this episode. But if you leave a review for me, wherever you listen to your podcast, I'm going to run a competition that between now and Christmas Day, I'm going to pick a winning review on random for whoever has left one during this period, to just make sure, you put your name in the review, and I'll announce it in the first show after Christmas. But whoever wins will get my top 5 books of all time. And these books are, well, I'll tell you one of them, actually. It's actually quite an expensive book, so it's a good one. It's The Course in Miracles, which I've talked about, which is a very good book. I think that alone is £30. So I will send you my 5 top books. But anyway, so do that. Just leave a review, make sure your name's in it, and listen to the podcast for the first episode after Christmas Day. Thank you. Right, back onto the book. So I've been reading a book by Estelle Roberts, which is actually, she was a great medium. Don't ask me exactly when, but back many, many, many years ago. And she used to have a spirit person channel through her called Red Cloud. And I was reading this passage on the book earlier. It's only a small book, but it is a great book nonetheless. And it says, to this, let me go back up. Where do I want to start it from? So it's essentially talking about, a time in the country where we were about to go through war. It was a very grave time. So I just want to take you back to that time, because that was when the book was wrote, and that's when the spirit was channeled. And it says, believe this and march straight ahead, having no fear. If you have fear, then you have a belief in something that is opposed to God. The only way to find him is to hold fast in this day of life, and to let know that at death you will awaken and hear the words, well done, hold fast. Let this new birthright of creative force of good be fostered by all the attributes of the spirit in your midst. Let it be fostered by love and kindliness until it becomes a mighty weapon for good and peace throughout the whole world. Now, I had a few thoughts about that passage. I've come to the conclusion that we are unlimited in our potential. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, as a human being, as a soul, we have unlimited potential. So, some of the crazy unlimited potential examples I have come across is people who so know that they are the force of God, which, whatever your relationship to the word God, some people hate it. I didn't like it. I tied it to religion. I would think, oh no, the church doesn't like gay people. I don't like religion. The word God, I wish I could remember now on the show what it actually meant, but I can't, so I'm just not going to make it up. But essentially, it's love. And we all have different concepts, but God is the oneness of everything, the oneness of which we are all connected, and God lives in us. And essentially, it is our birthright, even to talk to the spirit world. People say, well, how do I do this? Well, actually, you're not doing anything that you wasn't given the birthright to do. You can talk to the spirit world. You can connect to them. Everyone can do that. You are a soul, and you can connect to other souls because you are not doing anything of which you are not. So it made me think that if we are truly unlimited beings, which I believe we are, and I've seen people, like I've said on this show, pull crystals from the air. Like literally crystals from the air, and you're probably thinking, Jason, this is the biggest load of... And believe me, I even said at the top of the episode that I was a magician, so trust me, I know how sleight of hand is done, and I've seen people pull crystals from the air, and then you ask them how they do it. Well, that's a very generalisation. I've heard a story of a very good medium of mine asking someone, how did you pull that crystal from the air? And the person replied, do you believe in God? And the medium I know said, well, yes, I do believe in God. And the person who performed the miracle said, well, the difference is I know I am God. So it brings me back to, and obviously some of the other examples, if you even go back to the Simon Duran episode, one of the really early episodes, he's a scientist, very well-respected scientist who basically dedicates his whole life to researching paranormal phenomena. And he even had on that episode someone who managed to, and this was all done in laboratory conditions because Simon is a professor. That is what he does. So in lab conditions, he says in that episode, they took someone that his day job and what he does and tells people he does is he tells people he is a magician, funnily enough. But he's a real magician. So he does illusions, but that's what cover he uses in his ordinary life. And this man essentially teleported with no clothes on, nothing. He was led in naked, as Simon Duran does explain on the episode, locked in a cell, and then managed to teleport a whole load of banknotes to the cell with him. So, and you'd be thinking, well, how the hell is that done? And you ask him, and he said, well, his masters do it, he says on the episode. And I asked the question, and it transpires it is his spirit masters. So, we are unlimited beings. And I know that I am an unlimited being. I want to be doing platform mediumship on stages, harnessing the collective power of the room and showing to theatres, he says, that, I want to be doing something that shows everybody the power of the spirit. I want to change, how demonstrations of mediumship are seen. And if anything, I want to work in a way that is outside of norms. I don't want to work within a box, which ties me back to what my granddad said to me, which is, Jason, don't, spend your life trying to read books and getting obsessed with finishing the book and get obsessed with, always giving your power to the author because the author is the expert. What my granddad came through to me to say is, Jason, you have your own way of explaining things, to take bits and pieces from each teacher that resonate with you and form your own way of talking, which is, again, what I'm going to be doing on this podcast for you, explaining to you what it is that I know and believe. So then you can go out there, do your own research. I'll point you where to go and then you can figure it out. But, to say on this show now, you are an unlimited being. Your potential on this planet is limitless. That should be really, really empowering to hear that. But the difficulty we have is we have the ego, and the job of the ego is, and that's the part of the brain, the primitive part of the brain, which you can read all about in books like Monkey Mind and stuff like that. We get into these ways of being because every single day when we, wake up, we're a repetition of the day before. We just have these same thought loops. So explained very well scientifically, but we need to form new neural pathways, which is what happens when you bring around change. It'll be what happens when you develop your mediumship. So you need to do that, you need to get in the habit of doing things regularly. So let me explain the law of attraction really simply, because the law of attraction is something that I have talked about on this show, and I've read the book The Secret. I've tried every bloody way to manifest anything. But, if you want to manifest something in your life, one of the best bits of advice I can give you is you need to emit at the frequency of the thing that it is that you want. So if you want to, let's say, get a new job, and you're going to feel a certain way when you get that job, what I would encourage you to do is to close your eyes and imagine that in your mind. Because once you start imagining it, you'll get and invoke a feeling. And what that does is that puts you on the frequency, first of all, of that thing. And your subconscious brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not when you imagine it. So it's a very, very, very powerful act. But that alone, done regularly, done, just even once a day, can be absolutely profound on what they can do. But what most people will do is they will think in their mind about all the ways why it's not possible. And by doing that, you stop it because you immediately tell yourself in your mind, because every thought has a consequence and every thought has, a reoccurring thing that comes off the back of that. So if you every thought leads to something. So, never think that when you have a thought, it is just a thought. It's not. It emits a frequency, and that frequency goes out. And what most people will do is they will think of all the reasons why it won't work, and they don't truly believe that it's possible. But if you believe that it's possible, again, your subconscious doesn't know doesn't know, what am I trying to say here? Doesn't know the difference. So it will be delivered. So, the best advice I can give you is to sit every day, close your eyes, meditate for 10 minutes and just imagine that thing and immerse yourself in that imaginary experience and emit that frequency and just believe it's possible. It's not your job to figure out how it's going to come about. That's not your job at all. You don't need to figure it out. You just need to surrender that to God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, because that's not your problem. Your problem is just to believe, and that's not even a problem. You just want to feel good with it. So just sit yourself down, imagine what it is you want. So I do it, I do it. I wouldn't say daily. I don't do it, every single day without fail, but I will imagine myself on a particular theatre stage doing some mediumship, because that for me, and I do it with this podcast sometimes. I'll imagine it touching lots of people, so and it's powerful. So what I would also say on this episode, I wanted to talk a bit about some experiences I've had recently with my mediumship. But I'm going to save that for a whole nother episode because I've already talked for so long on this episode today. But basically, I went on a week recently called Magician to Mystic, which I do want to talk about because I learned loads on that week about the spirit world. But I've just got completely, lost in the time here today. So I'm also going to do an episode for you as well soon, which is going to be like a meditation episode to help you sit in the power as well and to find out what the power is for you. Because again, it feels different for us all. I'll tell you what it feels like to me in the episode, but it is different for us all. But what I would say is if there's particular subjects or areas of my knowledge that you would like me to talk about, then just simply drop me an email and I will do that. And also very soon, I'm going to be putting out some videos on the YouTube account, which don't ask me what the handle is right now on the show, but I think it's Jason Paul Soul Sync or something like that. I'm going to be putting out some videos all about my mediumship. So if you just follow over there, you'll get notified when I finally get around to doing that. But anyway, I'm sending you lots of love. It's been a delight to talk to you, and I will see you soon.